and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show, brought to you by ProgressiveChristianity.org. We are very glad that you're here with us. We also hope that you'll be with us on social media as well. Find us on Facebook at the Moonshine Jesus Show. And also, a couple of notes about the show today. As always, this is not a spoiler-free broadcast at all.
Mm-mm.
No. And in this movie, that matters a lot because spoilers can really spoil the show. And also, our final segment is a Q&A. So as we're going along, we might not be able to respond in the first couple of segments, but by our last segment, any questions you have that you put in the comment section, we'll certainly try to get to. And Caleb, so good to see you again, sir. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Mark?
Great. I like the wood panel in the background. I feel like you're in like a Western saloon. We're doing The Power of Dog today, which is a Western 1925.
I'm on location in Montana.
Yeah,
a saloon.
It's amazing.
I'm actually at my mother-in-law's house in Missouri, but same
it's
same
working
kind
great
of vibe.
for you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
It feels authentic. It feels authentic.
We should take this show on location. Wouldn't that be great?
Oh yeah, if folks want to see it on location, just fund us.
That's right. Yes. Here's where you can leave a donation to our travel fund so that we need to pick something exotic next time. Speaking of exotic things, you drinking anything exotic today?
Well, I was going to ask you. I'll tell you, I have. I sat down and I researched the bars of the West, Old West.
Ooh, yeah.
And I've got two drinks because they go together. Because here's the thing. Okay. In the movies, you always see cowboys drinking a lot of liquor, right?
Yeah.
They at the bar. But they wouldn't because they're going to be there for 6 hours of show. They're playing cards. They're doing stuff that they want to keep their wits about them. So they'd have a shot of rot gut. And so I've got some rot gut. Rot gut is basically bourbon that's not been aged in a barrel yet. It is nasty. It is strong. And luck would have it that my favorite distillery, Bourbon Trace, actually makes one, and it's semi-themed. It's called White Dog.
White Dog.
So
wow.
Got that. So I've got at the beginning of each segment, I'm gonna have a shot of rot gut. I'm a little worried about it because I also do a bourbon podcast, and I'm worried that I'm gonna look like a wimp hitting this because it's gonna be tough. And then what they would drink in between their shots.
Judge you.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that. And what they drink in between their shots was much lighter, and sometimes, frequently, some recent excavation has shown that it was ginger beer. I actually have a ginger beer that began in 1921, which makes it a likely candidate for some of the beer that our characters would have actually been drinking. So I'm going to wait for you to announce your drink, and then I'll cheers you and toss back this rot gut and see if I embarrass myself or not. So what do you man?
Wait, Mark, this is what I love about doing podcasts with you. We always learn something. We have fun and we learn something.
Absolutely. Why not, right? What's life? How much fun is life if you're not learning?
It's not fun at all.
Right, I'm with you.
Who hasn't wanted to know what cowboys were drinking on the frontier? I've always wanted to know that. That's great. So I am just drinking. I'm drinking Bullet bourbon. I thought Bullet would be perfect for they're on the. It's called
and
Frontier
they put right
whiskey.
there in the bottle, right? They put Frontier bourbon whiskey. Or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm drinking Bullet Frontier bourbon, but I've got it mixed up in an old fashioned, but
nice.
I'm drinking it neat. And it's not adorned at all. I found whatever glass I could find at my parents' home. And I like here we go. Bullet Frontier whiskey.
I like it. Well, here we go.
To you, Mark.
Cheers to you. Let's get down the gullet, as they would say.
I'll throw mine back, too. Yeah.
Oh, good God. Woo. Yep. All right. That was fun. So we're going to have a little break here and be right back. And dig into this show, The Power of the Dog. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where we are talking about the power of dog.
Yeah.
Mark, you've got your shot loaded back up.
As promised, at the beginning of every segment, we're going to tip it back again. Oh, God.
Okay, do it.
All right, there we go. Woo!
You took that like a champ.
I felt the power of the white dog, that's for sure.
The power of the white dog.
Woo.
Oh, so today we are talking about The Power of Dog. This is a film that is set in Montana in 1925, if you haven't seen it. And it follows the Burbank brothers, Phil, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, George, played by Jesse Plemons, who own a ranch together. And George quickly falls in love with Rose Gordon, who is portrayed by his real-life wife, Kirsten Dunst. And the character's name is Rose, and Rose has an effeminate son, Peter, who is played by Cody Smith-McPhee, who Phil, Benedict Cumberbatch's character, is immediately cruel to. And so this film explores themes such as love, grief, resentment, jealousy, masculinity, and sexuality. And so it is called The Power of Dog, but we might as well call it The Power of, like, why we all hate Phil. Because don't you hate Benedict Cumberbatch's character in the show, Mark?
First of all the four lead actors and actresses were amazing.
They were phenomenal. They all got Oscar nominations, right?
Yeah,
3 of them?
Yeah, and they everybody except for Cody. And honestly, I think Cody only didn't get nominated because Jesse did as a supporting actor. Either one of them could have been nominated. They were phenomenal. But Benedict Cumberbatch and Kirsten were probably the standouts, even heads above those folks. And Benedict, as you were pointing to, he was so amazingly good. I hated him and his character. Like, we had to watch this for this podcast. I did not want to, because I viscerally and internally were like, I don't let people like this in my life. Why am I going to suffer for 2 hours watching this? I mean, did you have a similar kind of...
Yeah, and so Mark and I talked about this morning. Hey, it's good to see you drinking the ginger beer. Drinking the ginger beer. So Mark and I were kind of talking about this before the podcast today, and we were both like, well, did you like this? And we were both like, man, that was hard to watch. I like Benedict Cumberbatch too. I'm a huge fan. And
it was beautifully directed too. I mean, it's so weird that we didn't want to watch it.
She won the Oscar for that. Yeah.
It's so weird that we didn't want to watch, because it was just a brilliantly done film.
It was incredible,
with one exception, I would say.
Yeah.
And it was based on a book from 1967, so of the same name. So I'll give some of, but I still think they should have rethought some of what they did. And we can get
I think I know where you're going. I want to hear this.
I feel like that the take on the LGBTQ community, because we ultimately have 2 characters who are either bi or gay men, probably gay, possibly queer. They don't really fill that out too much.
Right. Yeah.
But we get the book was written in 67. We get a very 67 take on this. And pretty much it's that if you are in any of those categories, you must be horribly broken in some way that's related to that.
Yeah. And both of the characters who we are left to kind of assume are gay, are portrayed as horribly broken, right? One is incredibly cruel, and the other one commits murder. At the end
and is seems to have there's a moment where we find out part of his backstory is his father hangs himself.
Right.
And I feel like they're trying to let us know from that point on, he cuts himself off from caring much about life. Not just like he wants to be a doctor, but it doesn't seem so much about healing people as much as like having some control over life. Like there's the whole bit where he captures a rabbit that his mother loves, and then one of the folks who work in the house come to see the rabbit and give him a carrot, and he's got the thing at his desk in his bedroom, flayed open, dissecting
He's dissecting it.
And he seems completely indifferent. Like, I'm sorry. I know this is tough to see. He just kind of seems annoyed that you interrupted him.
It's not going to be interested in this. It doesn't want the carrot. No, it's just it's morbid curiosity. It's not going to want the carrot. No,
And
it's
then,
not. It's
and then there's that
dead
later
and
thing
open.
with another rabbit that's
Yeah.
captured.
Right, well, Benedict Cumberbatch's character Phil says, "Put it out of its misery," and he snaps its neck, and
Hardly
you
even,
are
and it doesn't. There's no
no
like. So
emotional.
they present him as a very tender character. Like he at the
Right,
beginning, we see him making these wonderful flowers out of
yeah,
paper that
beautiful
he puts
flowers,
together, and they're just amazing.
and Phil
Benedict
makes fun of him
Cumberbatch,
for that. Yeah,
Phil, yeah, he burns his flowers and makes fun of him and all of that.
right.
So he's presented as this tender character, and we get to that second scene with the rabbit, and he's like you said, Phil says, "Put it out of his misery," and Peter holds it and starts to pet it, and then we cut up to Peter's face, and you see him kind of move like he just did something.
Yeah.
You hear a crack and
Right.
an emotionless face.
Right. Yes.
And
Nothing.
so we're like you said, we've got these two folks who are presented as very deeply broken, and
Mhm.
it feels like an old trope of if you're not straight, then there's something wrong with you, and there must be this brokenness that comes along with it. I hesitated there saying that because we have two other characters that are also broken, and they're not gay
Right.
characters. But it felt a little insensitive to me that this is so typically a Hollywood course
Mhm. Mhm.
with these two characters. It felt very insensitive, and like I'm not even sure
Yep.
it was particularly important, and may have been a bigger, larger message if Cody's character, if they'd changed it up a little bit and just had him be a straight, effeminate male.
Right.
Because
Yeah, I think you're right.
because I mean,
Yeah.
this is in some ways about, at least if you a lot of folks gravitate towards, this is about toxic masculinity, right? And we
Mhm.
do have some very toxic masculinity stuff, and I've got a
Sure.
different take on that I'd like us to talk about a little
Yeah.
bit. But just
Uh-huh.
knowing that, it might have been a stronger storytelling to
Yeah.
have Cody be a straight guy, very attracted to the
Uh,
women and
right.
different things like that, but still
He's just
have kind
effeminate.
of just a more in touch with his feminine side,
Sure.
and have
Right.
Benedict picking on him about that, thinking that he's gay, and him being very different from that. That might have been a more complex way to present this story, and it would have
Yeah.
bought less into that really old horrible trope of Hollywood of
Yeah.
that if you're gay, something must be wrong with you, you must be broken in other ways.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful point, Mark. And when we think about 1967, when this is written, I mean, being a part of the LGBT community in any way, in any one of those letters, is thought to be thought to be a mental illness. You know, it's still
Right.
listed in the DSM as a mental illness.
Yeah.
Um, Although we don't necessarily find out for sure that Cody is gay, it's strongly implied that he
Right.
probably is.
That is true.
But it
And if he
could be
wasn't, they
for
worked way too hard.
manipulation.
If he
Yeah,
wasn't,
yeah.
they put too much time into making us think he
The
is, without
That's true.
revealing that
Fair
he
enough.
isn't. If you're going to put that much time into making you think he is, it would have been very
Then
cool near the
yeah,
end of the movie to do that little twist, so you question yourself and
yeah.
go, "Oh, well, that's on me
Maybe,
because
yeah,
I'm
I was
buying
bringing my own
into."
presumptions to that,
Yeah,
or
exactly,
something like that.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I was, and I probably should have caught on this earlier, but I did catch on pretty quickly that that Phil, Benedict Cumberbatch's character, was probably gay because he
Right,
kept talking about Bronco Henry, and
right,
I mean it was clear that Bronco Henry,
right.
was his
Well,
mentor and
and
was someone who was important to him. But it became pretty
absolutely, yeah,
clear
you're right.
that he was his
Yeah,
lover.
and
He
he
was
was
yeah,
so visceral about attacking Peter and
right,
his sexuality. I mean, that is it's not always the case, but it's not unusual that a person that is that aggressive has
right,
some latent kind of own desires that they're scared of, or trying to hide,
yeah.
or trying to fit into society because they think that they'll whatever. So
And maybe this will be interesting for us to talk about later on. But I mean, I think
I
that's
think
one
it
of the
will be.
reasons we see so many people who are anti-LGBT,
Right.
are often folks who have some inclinations themselves and feel like they're trying to compensate
Mhm.
for being for having some same-sex attraction or whatever it is,
Right.
that they feel like they need to condemn people who are living into that more fully.
Yeah.
And it's sad to see that, and it's sad to see people deny that part of themselves. But I think you're right, and we certainly see that here in the movie as Benedict Cumberbatch's character
Oh, yeah.
just is cruel, and I mean cruel towards Peter, towards
Oh,
Cody's
massively.
character Peter. Yeah, incredibly cruel.
Yeah,
And
unbelievably.
that's something that we see over and over again. And I want to maybe, as we explore some of the theopolitical issues, talk more about this. I think that, and Mark, I want to hear your perspective on this, maybe as we move into the next segment. But yeah, we see some toxic masculinity, but I think
Mhm.
a lot of it is about grief and about how Phil isn't
Yeah.
dealing with the grief that he has,
Yeah.
and I think it's wound up with the sexuality and not being able to be,
Mhm.
to fully verbalize
Yeah.
what his experience has been,
Yeah, and
but
I'm sure you're right.
to
I
deal with the
also
grief.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also feel like,
Mhm,
um, uh, all the talk out in public right now about this in terms
mhm,
of masculinity is about toxic masculinity. When you go back and look at Jane Champion, the director's previous
uh-huh.
films, and some of the themes of it, I'm beginning to wonder if this isn't about toxic masculinity as much as it is about trying to expose the myth of masculinity. That there is
Interesting.
something that
Yeah.
can be defined as masculine over other things that might not be. Because we
Mhm.
have a lot of characters who are trying to be masculine and are masculine in their own ways, then some are playing into standard ideas of it, and some of them are very masculine in less traditional ways. And I feel like that they play them out, and it becomes a very interesting an interesting thread that runs through it at the least. So why don't we do
Absolutely.
this? Why don't we do this?
Yeah,
Let's take another quick break
let's
and
do it.
come back, and we'll talk about the theological, political, but we'll also talk about some of these things that we're talking about. Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. I have queued up yet another shot of this horrible white dog, as promised. I think this is a really
I want to
bad
see you
idea.
drink
I
it.
should not. I've not said that I'm going to be doing this, but here we go. Here's to your health, sir.
Yes, drink it, Mark.
All right, I'm going to do some of this. Wash it down. So we touched a little bit of this on the last segment, and you
Mhm.
rightfully said maybe we can talk more about it in the political section. Is so Cumberbatch, his character Phil, I did feel like early on there were some early cues about how horribly aggressive he was towards
Yeah.
Peter's more effeminate character.
Mhm.
Um, Gave some clues that maybe that he was trying to hide something or make up for something or somehow yell at himself for being who he
Yeah.
is. Um, and we do see that play out in politics a lot, don't we? Where some of the loudest anti-LGBTQ voices actually, and it's easy to make fun of folks for that. That they you end up getting revealed as being part of that community, whether they want to be or
Mhm.
not. And
Right.
we tend to make fun of them for that. Oh, of course he is. Da, da, da. Isn't there something actually sad about society that it creates a
Incredibly so.
space where that's who they are, where they're out there attacking, and not just attacking, but creating laws that work against exactly who they are because they feel like
Yeah.
in this society they don't have any other choice.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible to see. I mean, it breaks my heart every time. I mean, you're right. In some ways, whenever you see a politician who's been so vehemently anti-LGBTQ and has been advocating laws that hurt LGBTQ folks, it's easy to be like, of course they are. But you're right. It is sad to see a society where that feels like the only option. And I mean, the church plays a large role in that. And that's pretty sad because the church tends to be a voting block for these folks. And I think it's incredibly sad that instead of focusing on God's love in the church, instead of focusing on radical hospitality, instead of focusing on how the biblical narrative is a movement towards justice, because I think it is. If you see the Bible as an overarching story, you see each story as being a bit more just than what was before it. Taken out of context, it can seem unjust, but as an arc, you see it as a movement towards justice. Instead of seeing it like that, we tend to pick and choose verses and use it to exclude people. And then the Christian right is a voting block and uses that as a way to influence legislators that in order to remain in power, they need to pass legislation that is discriminatory towards many groups.
It plays to the base. Plays to their base.
That's right. They play to their base, even though they may be a part of the community themselves. And so, yes, it would be wonderful to live in a society where people are able to be who they are and don't have to live in fear. Yeah. And I think in the gospel, we call that the kingdom of God. I
think I've heard that. I think I've heard it referred to like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Jesus said something about it. I don't know. Well, maybe not.
And I think what part of the problem with what the church does with the kingdom of God is it puts it pie in the sky in the sweet by and by.
It's absolutely. Old guy in the sky after you die. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a present possibility, which is supposed to be. Yeah. That's really what this is about, which brings me, I think, to my next political point that ties in with the movie. And it's in the title. It's the power of dog. And I think a lot of what we see is people using power and abusing it and hurting other people. And that's certainly, doesn't it feel like most of politics, particularly in the U.S. and lots of other nations, has really become about how much power can I wield, not just hold, how much can I wield against other people? Because it's certainly possible to hold power and practice it in a loving way, which I think might be the ultimate point of this movie. But what we tend to see is people wielding power and hurting other people.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about that from the LGBTQ community. Why do you think we've devolved to that space?
Yeah. And I think that's probably true. I mean, to a certain extent, there have always been people who have been interested in power above all else. And that's true historically. It's also true like as our history as a nation. But I think we did used to have politicians who were generally concerned with the common good, and we don't we've seen, especially in the Trump era, people who have devolved into just caring about what can keep them in power. And I don't know if it's the general dumbing down of society or
that's certainly part of it.
Or that
was intentional too.
Lack of interest. Yeah. Oh, of course it was. It was absolutely intentional.
And part of that was because it makes it easier to hold power and not be questioned.
It does. That's right. Yeah, if you don't have people who are questioning you, if you have people who are believing the talking heads, on media that are intentionally spreading false beliefs, right? They're not even looking at the facts. Exactly. They're just intentionally spreading false information with the hope of keeping certain people in.
And let's not forget, as you pointed out about something else earlier in the show, the church's role in the dumbing down of America, in terms of so many churches don't want you asking questions. Just listen to what the person with power says.
Yes.
Almost always an older white dude.
Listen to me.
Straight. Listen to that older white straight dude, and he'll tell you what to think. Turn off your brains. that famous meme that goes around of the church sign that says an open mind is the devil's playground, or don't open your mind so
I
much your
haven't
brain
seen
falls out.
that.
Yeah.
That's
There's
awful.
also don't open your mind so much that your brain falls out. Just ridiculous church signs that really overly support that idea of you're better off not thinking and let us decide what you should be thinking. It's ridiculous.
No, I think the don't be so open-minded that your brains fall out. There's a William Sloane Coffin thing.
Yeah.
but I think you're right that like churches need to be places that actively encourage people to ask questions.
Right.
And so one of the things that I did kind of appreciate about Power of the Dog. So like whenever I heard that title, I had no idea. This is coming from a like liberal mainline Protestant perspective. I had no idea that was like a biblical title.
I had no idea.
It comes from like in seminary, they'd always tell us for the Bible exams, you need to go and you need to study with the Baptists. And that was certainly true. I had no idea. Yeah. But until
that scene, until that scene when he pops the Bible out and he starts reading through it. And I go, oh yeah.
So it's the Book of
That's kind of an important verse for Christians. What's that?
Yeah. So it's the Book of Common Prayer, right? And it's from Psalm 22, and he starts reading from this. And if you don't know, the opening words of Psalm 22 are going to sound real familiar for Christians. It says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Right?
Exactly.
It's what Holy Week's next week. It's what Jesus says on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? And it's a psalm about people feeling distant from God. But one of the things I think is interesting is, this phrase that we see them reading, which is the power of the dog, deliver me from the power of the dog, is what is that power and who is the dog? I think it's maybe Benedict Cumberbatch's character. And I think one of the ways that they subvert traditional Western stuff is that it's not physical power, it's psychological power. But what did you make of that, Mark?
I kind of felt like the dog, I think both in Psalm 22 and in the title of this movie, it's not about a person. It's about a bunch of people. It's about society and the way that society pursues groups of people and comes at them hard and surrounds them. Because a little earlier in Psalm 22, it's like the dogs are around me. They surround me. And you think about society, it surrounds you, and you're kind of, and it pushes its expectations on you. And there is a lot of power in that. People change their behavior, just like we were talking about politicians who change their behavior because of the expectations of their base or society in general. So that's kind of what I read into it. Before we wrap this segment up, though, I wanted to quickly go back to it felt like with the twist at the end, a slight twist at the end, where the person who you felt was the victim the most of the time, the character of Peter, ends up, and the more effeminate of the I would say he and Phil are the main characters. Rose and George are the secondary main characters. But of the two, he was the more effeminate of the lead characters, and he ultimately wins out. And a lot of people are interpreting that as the death, like defeating toxic masculinity. I can't help but think what we're looking at, because after Phil dies, which we figure out Peter had a lot to do with, and his mom and George, Phil's brother, are coming back to the house. Peter watches him come in, and he turns around and he gets this little pleased look on his face.
Right.
And that is revenge. That is revenge. Yeah. And if there's anything that is part of toxic masculinity, it is revenge. I don't know.
That's a good point. That's very interesting.
I don't know that this is actually a movie about defeating toxic masculinity. I think maybe particularly because of that scene, that this is a movie about the myth of masculinity, that we have decided that there are things that are strictly feminine and things that are strictly masculine. And those are all human constructs that help us in no way whatsoever. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I think that's a great point, Mark. And because I think we're supposed to, I think that maybe that truly is what the movie's about, but I don't know if the director knows it. I think we're supposed to think. I think we're supposed
I
to
would
think.
actually say though,
Yeah,
based on
tell
her
me.
previous
Yeah.
film, I
Uh-huh.
think that she may have done that intentionally and is waiting for all of us
Hmm.
to figure it
Hmm.
out.
Hmm.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. Well, I tell you
Yeah.
what, we're not going to solve that
Well,
mystery here.
we're not gonna solve it. No.
So let's have another drop. We'll come back with our Q&A.
Okay.
If you have questions out there, let us
Yes,
have
put
them.
them
If
out there.
not, we'll be asking each other questions. So don't worry about it. We'll take up the slack.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We've got not very many questions out there, but before we get to asking each other questions, I want to see Mark take another
Yes,
shot of
well,
this white dog.
thank God in the heavens that this is my last time having to do this. Cheers,
I'll
y'all.
take a shot with you. Yeah.
I appreciate the camaraderie there.
Thanks, although mine probably tastes a little bit better.
I guarantee it. I love an old fashioned.
Yeah, that's right. And in your other podcast, don't you make up an old fashioned every week? And that
Every week, well, every month. We do it one a month, and it's,
every month.
but we finish it off with a really nice old fashioned. So hey, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's my favorite cocktail. I love it.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
again, if you think of questions, you can go ahead and put them in there.
Well, I have questions for you.
Okay. Yeah. Ask me.
It's a two-parter. Well, it's a possible
Oh.
two-parter.
Ooh.
Possible
Okay.
two-parter, depending on how you answer.
Okay, I'm ready.
Part. Okay, so
Yeah,
my
tell
first
me.
part is maybe everything we've talked about this whole episode is wrong.
Uh-huh.
And maybe
Mark,
maybe,
don't do that to me.
and maybe
don't pay any attention to the rest of the episode.
pay no
Mark's
attention to
gonna
the man
discredit it right
behind-
now.
Pay no attention to the man behind the white dog shot. What if?
Okay.
What if this is actually a movie about the foolishness of binaries? You've got masculinity, femininity. You've got strong, smart. You've got submissive, dominant. You got good, evil. You got powerful, meek. What if this is really about how ridiculous the idea that these binaries actually have any real boundaries, that it's not some giant blended together continuum that it's all on? What could it be that's what this really is?
Well, whether or not that's what the movie's about, I think that's an important point. That binaries are rarely the right way to go. I mean, certainly we've seen this in terms of like the spectrum of sexuality, that it's not, and gender, that it's not a binary, right? You're not. Yeah,
Right.
that a lot of people aren't straight or gay. A lot of people
Right.
aren't male or female. But these are things that we've defined as a societal construct.
Right.
And I think that that's important to realize. I think that that's important to realize when we're talking about things like theology and politics as well. That, that we don't have to think in terms of a binary for theological purposes either. I mean, are you a Christian or not? Do you believe in Jesus or not?
Have you been saved?
Have you been saved or not? I mean, right? A lot of people fall somewhere in the middle. Like,
right.
I don't know what to make of that. Like, yeah,
well,
I believe in a lot of the teachings of Jesus, but I don't know if I've had a salvation experience.
I agree. Well, I'm glad you answered the question that way, because it allows me to ask you a question that I've been looking for the person. The person that's smart enough to give me the answer, because I don't have.
I don't know if that's me.
I think it is. I think it is. I'm hoping it is. I got my fingers crossed, man. I got my fingers crossed so hard. Listen, so if it's true that these binaries that we want to be true aren't true, particularly things like good and evil, how do we define morality? If there
Yeah.
is no, if
Mhm.
there's no black and white here between good and evil, morality tends to, at least in how we think about it and practice it, say that there is something that's clearly right and something that's clearly wrong. What do we do with morality when we begin to, I think, correctly, intellectually accept the reality that binaries are false? It's all a continuum.
Yeah. It is. So here's what I tell a lot of my congregants when they come and ask me this exact same question, because this is
I
a
knew I was asking
question
the right person.
that is that like we navigate that stuff as a community, right? If
Yeah.
we're talking about faith issues, I think that's one of the importance of doing faith like as a community and not doing it by yourself. I'm still an
Right.
advocate of that because I think that as a community we navigate that.
Well,
I think
if
that
you
when
look
we're
at,
talking about more, yeah, tell me.
I was going to say, talking about community, if you look
Mhm.
at it, no matter where you fall, if you're a Christian in any way, even if you're just saying, "Oh, that I'm a,"
Yeah.
so a lot of Christians are, particularly progressive Christians, like to say, "I'm a follower
Right.
of Jesus." The
That's
very
right.
first,
Yeah.
but they don't want to be part of church or anything, which I kind of get. Can be a
Yeah,
very
and we
toxic
don't
place.
wanna say necessarily we're Christian. There's a lot of
Right.
baggage with
But
that.
but
Yeah, I get
but
it. Yeah.
talking about the importance of doing theology within community, even
Uh-huh.
Jesus himself, the very first thing he did in ministry was go out and gather a community.
He
Come
did. That's
follow
right.
me. Like, I need a
Mhm.
community because theology
That's right.
is
We need
best
people.
done in community. And I
That's
sorry to
right.
interrupt,
And
but I just thought that
And
was
so
an
I think we
important.
do that as like that's something we should do as church, as like a theological community. But I think it's something we do ethically
Yeah,
as a community as well. That we need to be able to have hard conversations and
right.
to navigate these things in ways that are not, black and white. That it's not a dichotomy. That as a society, we need to be able to talk about the hard issues. And so you've all seen the meme that says like one of the reasons we can't talk about hard issues is because we've been taught not to talk about hard issues, right? Like politics and religion. We need to
Right.
be able to talk about those things because it is in discussion, it's in talking to one another that we navigate
Mhm.
where we need to stand on tough issues. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question or Mark, but that's my
I think it's a
or
very
not Mark,
helpful
but that's
answer
my
for
best.
sure. I think it's a very
Yeah,
helpful answer. It does
yeah,
change, I think, the way that we need to understand what morality is. That we're
hmm
not going to be making lists of what is moral. It is a more conditional
that's right,
word than we want to think that it is,
and
which
it's
makes.
fluid.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. It has to be fluid. It
it
has to be
changes.
situational, and it has to be
hmm
community based, and that
Yeah,
makes it a very complicated thing to navigate. But it's important to be navigating it in a healthy way, and I think what we're talking about is the beginning of figuring out how to navigate it in a healthy way.
absolutely. And so I've got a question for you, and it
Go
comes
for it.
from John Bidenbach. Thank
All
you,
right.
John, for writing a question. Appreciate that. He says you've both expressed that this movie is hard, unpleasant to watch.
Mm.
Would you consider it important to watch anyway? Akin to reading
Well, I'm
1984. What
gonna
do you think
yeah,
about that?
I'm going to tie this back into the answer that you just gave me. If
Oh,
you're going to
perfect.
watch it, if you're going to watch it by yourself
Uh huh.
and leave it there,
Yeah.
whatever. Watch it if you won't. Don't watch it if you don't.
hmm
If you're willing to watch it and be in community, even if it's a community of 2 or 3, and
Right.
really kind of grapple with what is this actually about? What's going on? What false
Mm.
dichotomies are happening? What science
Uh-huh.
shows of masculinity are going on, and have real discussions about it? Then yes, I completely believe that it's important to watch, even though it is hard to watch.
It is.
What do
And
you
did you
think,
watch?
Caleb?
I think you're right. Did you watch it as a community, Mark? Did you
I
watch it with
did.
someone else?
I don't think you need to watch it as a community. I think you
Yeah.
need to process it as a community.
Process it as a community. Okay, yeah. So I
And I
watched
feel
it
like that's
as a
what you and I have been
community.
doing here.
Yeah, that's right. And so we processed it together, but I processed it too, like as I was watching it. Like,
Right.
what do you
I
think
remember
is
you saying
happening
this.
here? Yeah, yeah. And I think that's powerful. I think that's one of the powers of pop culture stuff is that we
Yeah.
get to process it as community and that it helps us make sense of life as community. And so I that's one of the reasons why I think that it's justifiable to talk about theology and politics through the lens of pop culture because
Absolutely.
it helps us have this discussion as a community
Indeed.
together.
And it makes
So,
it feel safer. It makes it feel safer.
It
to have
does.
Yeah, it's slightly removed, but we talk about real truth. So, hey, Caleb, always appreciate your voice
That's it.
and your time.
Appreciate
Cheers
you,
to
Mark.
you, sir. Cheers to you.
Cheers. Oh, Mark, come on. One more shot of that white
Okay.
dog. Are you
All right,
going to do it?
we're gonna just for the folks in viewer land.
Okay.
One
Here, I'll
more.
do
Here's
one more
to you,
shot with
Caleb.
you.
All right,
Oh,
perfect.
Wait,
And
let me
yes,
pour it.
I do
Here.
encourage everybody to watch it, particularly if you're willing to process it. There's a lot of important issues that are actually brought up, and it is a beautiful, weirdly beautiful.
It really
shot,
is a beautiful movie.
and the directing is so subtly brilliant. So do watch.
It's incredible.
Cheers to you, sir.
Cheers to you, Mark. Cheers
Thanks
to all
for
of
tuning
you
in
out
to the
there.
Moonshine Jesus Show. We hope to see you all next week. Same time, same bet channel. See you later.
Bye.
Moonshine Jesus, nobody scared. Moonshine